I was supposed to die with them on that cliff. But my purpose was not to die, but to see, to remember, and to bring you a message from the edge of eternity about what happens when faith faces the abyss and the abyss loses. My name is Joon-Ho, and for years that name meant nothing. I was a ghost, a shadow in the most closed nation on earth of North Korea. My life was not my own. My thoughts were not my own. But then I heard a whisper, a truth so powerful it cracked the foundation of everything I had been taught. And that truth led me to a cold, wind-swept cliff over the Tumen River, standing beside 21 brave souls. The state had judged us. Our crime was owning a book, the Bible. We were called traitors, enemies of the people. The sentence was death. I can still feel the rough rope binding my wrists. I can still see the sheer terror and the profound peace on the faces of my friends. They pushed the first one, then the second. I closed my eyes, waiting for my turn, but it never came. The guard commander grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. He shoved me to my knees at the cliff's edge. "You will watch," he hissed. "You will see what happens to those who betray the great leader. You will live and you will tell everyone what you saw. You will be our example." So I watched. I saw every single one of them fall. I heard their prayers become screams, cut short by the rocks below. And in that moment, I was not a believer. I was a coward. I was a traitor who had been spared. I thought their story had ended. I thought God had abandoned us. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. What I witnessed that day was not an ending. It was a spark. And this is the story I was chosen to carry across oceans and borders to you. To understand the light, you must first understand the darkness. My world was not always one of faith. It was a world of gray. The gray of our uniforms, the gray of the concrete buildings, the gray of the sky, choked with the promise of rain that never seemed to wash anything clean. I was a low-level party member, a cog in the great machine. My job was agricultural logistics, a fancy title for moving rice from collective farms to state warehouses. It was a position of small privilege and of great blindness. I believed what I was told. We were the chosen people, the great leader was our son, and the outside world was a jealous, corrupting influence. My faith was in the system. It was a cold, hard faith built on fear and the quiet desperation to survive. I saw people disappear. You did not ask why. You simply looked at the empty space where they once stood, and you worked harder. The change began not with a bang, but with a whisper. His name was Mr. Kim. He was an old man assigned to my work unit. He had a limp from the war and eyes that held a sadness so deep it seemed to absorb the light around him. He was quiet, efficient, and kept to himself. I was his supervisor, and my only instruction was to ensure he worked and did not speak counter-revolutionary thoughts. One afternoon, a shipment was delayed. A truck had broken down on the muddy road to the warehouse. We were forced to wait, sitting on crates in the damp cold. I was frustrated, angry at the inefficiency. I muttered a curse against the driver. Mr. Kim was sitting nearby, sharpening a stick with a small knife. He did not look up, but he spoke. His voice was like dry leaves rustling. "The tree does not curse the soil for being wet," he said. it uses the rain to grow. I stared at him. It was a foolish saying. Nonsense. What does that mean? I snapped. He finally looked at me, and for a first time, I saw something other than sadness in his eyes. It was a flicker of amusement. It means, Comrade Joon-Ho, that frustration is a fire that burns only the one who holds it. The rain will dry, the truck will be fixed, or it will not. Your anger changes nothing. It was the first crack. He had not recited a party slogan. He had not praised the great leader. He had offered a simple, quiet logic that was entirely his own. In a world where every thought was prescribed, an original thought was a revolutionary act, I did not speak to him again that day. But his words, they stayed with me. They echoed in the silence of my small apartment. Over the next few weeks, I found myself watching him. He worked with a strange peace. While the rest of us were tense, always fearing a mistake, he moved with a deliberate calm. When a superior berated him for some minor infraction, he simply bowed his head and accepted the criticism, his face a mask of humility. But later I saw him. He was not brooding or seething like any normal man would. He was looking at a single stubborn leaf clinging to a barren tree, a faint, almost invisible smile on his lips. It was a mystery. And in a world devoid of mystery, I became obsessed. What was the source of his peace? What did he know that we did not? I began to create reasons to be near him. I assigned him to tasks with me. I shared a part of my lunch ration with him one day, a risky gesture. He accepted it with a nod, his eyes holding a question. Then, the incident at the river. We were tasked with clearing debris from an irrigation canal. The water was icy, running fast from the spring melt. A young, foolish worker slipped and was pulled under by the current. There was panic, shouting. We were all frozen, watching him being swept away. But Mr. Kim moved. Without a sound, he plunged into the freezing water. He was an old man, but he fought the current with a strength that defied his ears. He reached the boy, grabbing his jacket, and fought to drag him to the bank. We rushed to help, pulling them both from the water. The boy was coughing, terrified but alive. Mr. Kim was shivering violently, his clothes soaked, his skin pale blue. As we wrapped a thin blanket around him, I looked into his face. I expected to see fear or pain or even pride. But I saw none of those things. I saw a profound, quiet gratitude. His lips were moving silently. I leaned closer, the chaos of the others fading into the background. And I heard it, a whisper, so faint I thought it was the wind. But it was not the wind. My shepherd I shall not want. I straightened up, my heart hammering against my ribs. They were not words from the great leader. They were not a party mantra. They were something ancient, something forbidden. I had heard rumors of such things, whispers of a heavenly father, of a book. In that moment, staring at the shivering, peaceful old man, my gray world split open. And a single terrifying beam of light fell through. The words, "My shepherd I shall not want," echoed in my mind for days. They were a code I could not crack, a melody from a song I had never heard. They haunted me. I watched Mr. Kim even more closely, but now with a new, terrifying understanding. He was not just a peaceful old man. He was a subversive. He carried a secret inside him, a secret that could get us both sent to a camp or worse. Yet, the peace he carried was a magnet. My soul, though I did not have a word for it then, was starving. It had been fed a diet of propaganda and fear its entire life, and it was dying of malnutrition. Mr. Kim possessed a hidden nourishment. I had to know its source. One evening, I followed him after our shift. He did not go to the communal barracks. He walked toward the edge of the village, where the woods began to thicken. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. I was either about to discover the truth or walk into a trap. I kept my distance, moving from tree to tree, the twilight shadows swallowing me whole. He stopped at a large, moss-covered rock that had fallen long ago. He knelt beside it, his back to me. For a long time, he was still. Then, I saw his shoulders begin to shake. I thought he was crying, but then I heard it again. That same whisper carried on the evening breeze. It was a prayer. He was talking to someone, to this shepherd. I must have stepped on a twig. The snap was like a gunshot in the quiet forest. Mr. Kim froze. He slowly turned his head, his eyes wide with fear. When he saw it was me, the fear did not vanish, but it was joined by a deep, weary resignation. He knew his life was over. "Comrade Joon-Ho," he said, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "I can explain." I walked toward him, my own fear a cold stone in my stomach. I stood over him. I had all the power. I was the party official. It was my duty to report him, to have him taken. But I did not speak. I just looked at his face, etched with a lifetime of hardship, yet illuminated by a stubborn, inexplicable light. "I am not going to report you," I heard myself say. The words felt alien, dangerous. His eyes widened further. He searched my face for deceit. "Why?" he whispered. The words, I said, my own voice barely a whisper. "The shepherd. What does it mean? I must know." The tension drained from his body. He nodded slowly, gesturing for me to sit beside him on the cold ground. And there, in the gathering darkness, he began to tell me a story. It was a story of a creator God who did not live in a portrait on the wall, but who woven the fabric of the universe. A God who knew my name, who knew the number of hairs on my head. The concept was so vast, so personal, it felt like my mind was breaking. He told me of a Savior, Jesus, not a political leader who demanded obedience through fear, but a humble teacher who offered forgiveness through love. A man who performed miracles, who healed the sick, who loved the unlovable, who died a criminal's death, and then defeated death itself. The resurrection, the promise of eternal life, it was the most beautiful, the most insane, the most dangerous thing I had ever heard. This truth, Mr. Kim said, his voice gaining strength, is why I have peace. They can take my food, they can take my freedom, they can take my body, but they cannot take him from me. For me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. To die is gain. I looked at this frail old man, and I believed him. I believed that he truly saw death as a promotion. The fear that ruled my life, the fear that ruled our entire nation, had no power over him. He did not have a physical Bible. He called his mind his treasury. He had memorized vast portions of scripture, passed down orally from his own father, who had heard it from his. It was a living chain of truth, stretching back through generations, surviving purges and wars and famine. He began to feed me these verses, piece by piece, like a man giving bread to a starving prisoner. We met in that spot many times after that, under the guise of checking perimeter fences or foraging for wild herbs. We would slip away, and I would feast on the words. The Gospel of John wrecked me. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Love, not duty, not fear, love. It was the missing piece of my soul. I was no longer a party member. I was a disciple. The gray world had not changed, but my eyes had. I saw the suffering around me, not as inevitable hardship, but as a consequence of a broken world, a world that this Jesus came to redeem. The seed had been planted. It took root in the dark, barren soul of my heart, and it began to grow. But this kind of truth, it cannot stay hidden forever. It demands to be shared. It demands action. And that demand would lead us both toward the cliff. The peace I found was a fragile thing. It lived in the woods, in the whispered words of an old man. Outside of that sanctuary, the world remained just as dangerous, just as gray. But I was different now. I walked through my life with a secret, and that secret was a light I feared would shine through my eyes and betray me. The hunger for more of this truth became a constant ache. Mr. Kim's memory was a deep well, but I knew there was an entire ocean I had not yet tasted. Then the unthinkable happened. Mr. Kim did not report for work. At first, I thought he was ill. But by midday, 2 Bowibu officers in their crisp, dark uniforms walked through the work unit. Their eyes scanned the room, cold and calculating. My blood turned to ice. They asked questions. Had anyone noticed Mr. Kim behaving strangely? Had he spoken of anything unpatriotic? I gave the answers I was supposed to, my face a mask of obedient confusion. Inside, I was screaming. He was gone, vanished. The moss-covered rock in the woods remained, but the soul who prayed there was erased. The light in my world, so newly kindled, was violently snuffed out. The darkness felt thicker, heavier than ever before. Despair wrapped its cold fingers around my heart. This, I thought, is the cost of truth. This is what happens to the light. For weeks, I was a ghost. I performed my duties mechanically. The words Mr. Kim had planted in me felt like a curse. They had shown me a beautiful world, only to slam the door shut. I was alone. Truly alone. The emptiness was a physical pain. It was at the weekly market, amidst the sparse offerings of wilted cabbage and rough-hewn tools, that I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see a woman, her face worn by years of labor, a scarf covering her hair. Her eyes met mine, and she held my gaze for a second too long. There was no smile, only a silent intensity. Then she pressed a small, folded piece of paper into my hand and melted back into the crowd. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a trap. It had to be. The Bowibu were testing me. I clutched the paper in my fist, my knuckles white. I wanted to throw it away, to deny it ever happened. But I didn't. The memory of Mr. Kim's peace, a peace that had persisted even in the face of this very terror, flared within me. I found a moment of privacy behind the storage shed. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper. It was not a message, it was a map. A crude, hand-drawn sketch of a path leading deep into the woods, to a place I did not recognize. At the bottom, a single word was written: courage. That night, I faced a choice. I could burn the paper, go home, and try to forget. I could return to the gray safety of obedience. Or I could walk into the unknown. I thought of Mr. Kim, his quiet strength. I thought of his words, to die is gain. Was that my truth? Did I believe it enough to risk everything? I went. The moon was a sliver in the sky, offering little light. I followed the map by memory, every rustle in the undergrowth sounding like a footstep, every snap of a twig like a gun cocking. The path led to a secluded cave, its entrance hidden by a thick curtain of vines. I paused, my breath caught in my throat. This was the point of no return. I pushed through the vines. Inside, the air was cool and still. A single candle flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the cave walls, and in the dim light, I saw them, 3 other people. 2 men and a woman, their faces etched with the same fear and determination I felt. We said nothing. We simply looked at each other, a silent recognition passing between us. We were the hidden ones, the believers. The woman from the market stepped forward. She introduced herself as Micha. Her voice was low and steady. You are here because you are thirsty, she said, and because a faithful man now with the Lord testified of your seeking heart. Mr. Kim, even in his disappearance, he was guiding me. She explained the network, a fragile, secret chain of believers that stretched from the interior all the way to the Chinese border. Their mission was simple and impossibly dangerous. They were the conduits for the word. They smuggled Bibles, not for profit, but for prophecy, to feed the scattered, starving flocks of God's people in this spiritual desert. What we do, Micha said, her eyes locking with mine, is punishable by death. There are no second chances. The Bowibu have informants everywhere. You must trust no one outside this circle. But the truth is worth it. Is it worth it to you, Joon-Ho? I looked at their faces, illuminated by the single flame. I saw Mr. Kim's peace reflected in their eyes. This was the choice: to remain a secret believer, safe in my own heart, or to become a servant of the truth, no matter the cost. The words of Jesus, whispered to me by an old man in the woods, came back with crushing force. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The fear was still there, a live wire in my chest, but beneath it, something else was rising. A purpose. Yes, I whispered, the sound echoing softly in the cave. It is worth it. Micha nodded, a grave smile touching her lips. Then, repeat after me, she said. This is our oath. And there, in the flickering candlelight, surrounded by the ghosts of the mountains, I swore an oath that would bind my life to a path of shadows and ultimately to a cliff's edge. The oath was not long, but each word was heavy, a stone of commitment laid upon my soul. I swear by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Micha began, and I repeated, my voice gaining strength, to be a faithful steward of his holy word, to carry it in secret, to share it with wisdom, and to defend my brothers and sisters with my silence, my life for the truth. Amen. A solemn silence filled the cave. The oath was now a bond between us, sealed not with a handshake, but with shared peril. The older of the 2 men, a stern-faced individual named Kang, stepped forward. He was built like a lumberjack, with thick hands and a gaze that seemed to look right through you. The oath is the easy part, he said, his voice a low rumble. Now you learn. Your life and ours depends on it. For the next hour, they drilled me. This was not a spiritual discipleship, it was a crash course in espionage. Kang taught me the routes, not the main paths, but the hidden animal trails that skirted the villages. He showed me how to read the forest, how to use the stars for direction, and most importantly, how to move without a sound. You are a shadow, he whispered, demonstrating how to place his feet, rolling from heel to toe to avoid cracking twigs. The wind makes more noise than you must. The other man, a younger, wiry man called Jin, taught me about the package. He produced a small, thick book wrapped in waterproof oilcloth. A Bible. My breath hitched. It was the first complete one I had ever seen. He showed me how to conceal it, not in a bag, but on my person. We practiced sewing a hidden pouch into the lining of my work coat, large enough to hold the precious book flat against my back. The weight of it, even in practice, felt both terrifying and holy. Then came the most critical lesson: what to do if I was caught. There is no rescue, Micha said bluntly, her eyes holding mine. If you are taken, we cannot help you. You must have a story, and you must stick to it. You found the book, you were gonna turn it in, you know nothing, deny everything. Even if they torture you. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. Your suffering may save others in the network. Your silence is your final service. A week later, I was given my first mission. A simple one, they said. A test. I was to take a single Bible from a dead drop, a hollow tree, 10 kilometers to the north, and deliver it to a contact in a village along my official logistics route. The name of the contact was a code. The baker, I was to ask for a specific type of bread, no longer made. The response would be, the recipe is lost, but my grandmother remembers. The journey to the dead drop was the longest of my life. Every snap of a branch was a Bowibu agent. Every distant voice was a patrol. My heart felt like a wild bird trapped in my chest. When I found the hollow tree, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely retrieve the oilcloth wrapped package. I slipped it into the hidden pouch in my coat. It felt like carrying a live bomb. The walk to the village was an exercise in sheer will. I tried to be a shadow, as Kang taught me. I tried to breathe. When I found the small, dusty bakery, I almost turned back, but I thought of Mr. Kim. I thought of the words inside the package. I stepped inside. The old baker looked up, his face a mask of disinterest. There were other people in the shop. My throat was dry. I managed to whisper the request, the code feeling absurd on my tongue. The baker stared at me for a moment that stretched into an eternity. Then he nodded slowly. The recipe is lost, he said, his voice raspy. But my grandmother remembers. Relief washed over me so powerfully my knees felt weak. I made a small purchase of bread, and as he handed me the loaf, our hands brushed. The transfer was complete. The Bible was now his. I walked out of that bakery, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose so profound, it brought tears to my eyes. I had done it. I had become a link in the chain, a smuggler for God. That first successful run was a drug. The fear was still there, but it was now mingled with an intoxicating sense of purpose. I became a ghost, a whisper on the wind, carrying light into dark places. Over the following months, I made several more deliveries. I grew more confident, more skilled. I started to believe foolishly that we were invisible, that our network was blessed with divine protection. We were careful, but we were also human. And in North Korea, humanity is the weakest link. Our faith had made us brave, but it was about to make us targets. The clock was ticking, and we didn't even hear the sound. The success of those first missions was a dangerous thing. It bred a quiet confidence, a feeling of invincibility that was as fragile as glass. We were a small cell, a family bound by a secret more profound than blood. Micha was our heart, our prophet. Kang was our strength, our protector. Jin was our scout, our nimble messenger. And I was the logistician, the one who could move through the system with a plausible reason for being on the roads. We worked in beautiful, terrifying harmony. The spiritual hunger we encountered on our deliveries was both humbling and terrifying. We would arrive in a village, make the coded contact, and be led to a back room or a root cellar. There a handful of believers would be waiting, their faces gaunt, but their eyes burning with a desperate light. They would touch the Bible as if it were made of gold, gently turning the thin pages. They didn't want to keep it for long possession. It was a death sentence. They just wanted to see it, to have a few verses read aloud, to copy a single psalm onto a scrap of paper they could hide in their shoe. We were not just smugglers. We were lifelines. It was after one of these deliveries in a safe house outside of Chongjin that Micha gathered us. Her face was grave, more so than usual. She told us of a message from across the border, from the Korean Chinese pastor who was the source of our Bibles. His name was Minjun. The message was both an answer to prayer and a nightmare. A massive shipment was possible, not 1 or 2 Bibles, but 21, enough to equip every major cell in the northern region. It was an unprecedented opportunity, a chance to solidify the entire network for a generation. But the risk was equally monumental. It required all of us. We would have to cross the Tumen River at its most narrow, yet most heavily patrolled point. We would meet the contact on the Chinese side, receive the Bibles hidden in sacks of rice, a double blessing, food for the body and the soul, and carry them back, each of us taking 3 Bibles to different prearranged drop points. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. The scale of it felt audacious. A number chosen not for logistics but for prophecy, 21. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, a feeling this was too big, too bold. Kang, ever the pragmatist, voiced my fears. It is too much, he rumbled. The border is a snake's nest. They have increased patrols. This is a trap waiting to be sprung. But Jin, young and fervent, his eyes alight with passion, countered him. This is from God. Can't you see? 21 Bibles. It is a sign. He will make a way where there is no way. We have prayed for this. How can we say no? Micha listened to both, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. The need is great. The risk is greater. But to whom much is given, much is required. We will pray for 3 days, then we will decide. Those 3 days were agony. I prayed like I had never prayed before. I sought a sign, a feeling, a sense of peace. But all I felt was the cold dread coiling tighter in my gut. On the morning of the 4th day, we met again. Micha's face was pale but resolute. We go, she said. The Lord has given me a verse. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. The decision was made. The plan was set. We would move in 1 week during the new moon when the night would be at its darkest. We went over every detail 100 times. The route, the signals, the emergency abort codes. We were as prepared as we could be. The night before the mission, Jin found me as I was checking my gear. He seemed different, jittery. His usual fervor was edged with a strange nervous energy. He He clapped a hand on my shoulder. Are you ready, brother? Tomorrow we make history. I am ready, I said, though the dread was a stone in my belly. Good, he said, his grip tightening slightly. Remember, no matter what happens, it is for the kingdom. The cost is worth it. There was an intensity in his eyes that bordered on feverish. At the time, I mistook it for zeal, for faith. I see now it was the frantic energy of a man who knew a terrible secret. He was trying to convince himself as much as me. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the shadows. They were the last words he ever spoke to me as a brother. We were so focused on the mission, on the light we were carrying, that we missed the shadow growing among us. Betrayal often wears the face of a friend. If you have ever trusted someone with your very soul, you understand the cost. Help us ensure such sacrifices are not forgotten. Subscribe to Echoes of Return. The night was perfect for ghosts. A thick fog clung to the river valley, and the new moon offered no silver light to betray our movement. We moved as one shadow, a chain of 4 souls slipping through the pine forest toward the rushing sound of the Tumen River. Kang led, a mountain of silent grace. Micha followed her prayers, a silent steam in the cold air. Then Jin, and finally me, my senses screaming, every shadow a soldier, every owl's hoot a signal. We reached the river bank. The water was black and swift, churned by recent rains. This was the moment of greatest vulnerability. We had to cross one by one, exposed in the water. Kang went first, vanishing into the fog and the roar. A long 5 minutes passed. Then a single low owl called the all-clear signal. Micha went next. Then Jin. I was the last. I took a deep breath, the cold air biting my lungs, and stepped into the water. The current was stronger than I expected, pulling at my legs, the cold a shock that stole my breath. I fought my way across, my heart pounding in my ears, my pack with its empty rice sacks feeling like an anchor. I scrambled up the far bank into China, into a fleeting moment of impossible freedom. Kang pulled me into the cover of the trees. We were all there, shivering but alive. Micha pointed 100 yards away. A single lantern flickered twice, then went out. The signal, Pastor Minjun, was waiting. We moved toward it, a small fishing shack nestled in the trees. The door opened as we approached. A man with a kind, weary face gestured us inside. He didn't speak, just pointed to 21 small oilcloth-wrapped bundles laid neatly on a rough-hewn table. Next to them were sacks of rice, our cover, the Bibles. The transfer was swift, silent. We worked with practiced efficiency, untying the rice sacks, carefully inserting 3 bundles each and retying them. The weight was both a burden and a blessing. Pastor Minjun finally spoke, his voice a hushed, emotional whisper. God go with you. You are carrying fire to the frozen. Remember, you are loved. He made the sign of the cross over us, and we slipped back into the night. The return crossing felt heavier, slower. The current fought us, the water feeling thicker, as if the river itself was trying to stop us. But we made it. We were back on North Korean soil, the 21 Bibles safely with us. A wave of euphoria washed over me. We had done it. Against all odds, we had done it. I looked at Micha and I saw a tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. She smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. That smile was the last beautiful thing I would see for a very long time. We had taken no more than 10 steps from the riverbank when the world exploded into light. Blinding halogen beams stabbed through the fog from all sides, pinning us like insects. Shouted commands ripped through the night. Do not move, on your knees, hands on your heads. My mind went blank. Pure animal terror. We were surrounded by a full squad of border guards, their rifles aimed, their faces hard and impersonal. It was over. In an instant, it was all over. But how? The question was a scream in my head. We were so careful. The route was secure. The timing was perfect. And then I saw him, Jin. He was not kneeling with us. He was walking slowly, calmly toward the commanding officer. He did not look at us. He stopped before the officer and gave a slight formal nod. All four are present, Captain, Jin said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. The contraband is in the rice sacks, 21 copies. The sound of his voice, betraying us with such cold efficiency, was a physical blow. Micha let out a small, broken sound, like a wounded bird. Kang simply stared, his massive body trembling, not with fear, but with a rage so profound it seemed to radiate heat. I felt the world tilt. Jin, our brother, our zealous, fervent brother, he was one of them. A Bowibu plant, his entire identity, his passion, his faith, it was all a lie. A long, elaborate, cruel performance. The captain, a man with a thin, cruel mouth, smiled. Excellent work, Lieutenant Jin. The state is grateful. They dragged us to our feet, binding our wrists with rough wire that cut into our skin. They ripped open the rice sacks, pulling out the oilcloth bundles, tossing the Bibles into a pile like trash. As they shoved me toward a waiting truck, I caught Jin's eye for one final second. There was no triumph there, no guilt. There was nothing, just a void. He has sold our life for promotion, and in that moment I realized he has sold his own soul long before. The interrogation began before we even reached the prison. In the back of the bouncing truck, a guard backhanded Micha, demanding names. She spat blood on the floor and said nothing. They focused on me next. The logistician, the captain, sneered. You like plans. So here is a new plan. You will give me the names of every person you have ever delivered to, and you will live. You will refuse, and you will die with the rest of them. They took us to an underground bunker. The questions were a relentless, brutal storm. They knew everything. Jin had told them everything. They knew about Mr. Kim. They knew about the cave. They knew the codes. The only thing they didn't have were the names of the believers in the villages. Those we had to protect it. Those we had to protect. Days blurred into nights. The threats became reality. The pain became my world. But through the haze of agony, I held on to one thing: silence. I was the traitor who had been spared on the cliff, but in that cell I finally found a sliver of the courage I had lacked. I gave them nothing until they brought Micha into my cell. She was barely recognizable, her body broken, but her eyes still held that unquenchable light. The captain put a pistol to her temple. A final chance, Joon-Ho. One name, or I paint the wall with her brains. I looked at Micha. She looked at me, and she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. No, she was willing to die. She was ready to die. But I was not ready to let her. A sound, a raw, broken sob tore from my throat. No, please. I crumbled. The dam broke, and I gave him the name, the baker, the first contact. It was a name from months ago, a man who had likely already fled, but it was a name. I had broken, I had betrayed my oath, and Micha, for the second time, saw me become a traitor. The captain lowered the gun, a satisfied smirk on his face. He hadn't wanted the name, he had wanted my soul, and he had it. He looked at the three of us, Micha, Kang, and me, broken in that cell. The court has already reached a verdict, he said. You are to be made an example of. A public execution is too messy. Your disappearance will be a louder message. He leaned close, his breath fouled in my face. You will be taken to the very cliff you crossed under, and you will be thrown back into the darkness you came from. The sentence was delivered not with a shout, but with a whisper. And in that moment I knew my journey was ending at the same river where it had truly begun. The cost of trust was everything. The journey to the cliff was a death march in every sense. They transported us in the back of a closed military truck, the air thick with the smell of our own fear and sweat. No one spoke. Micha sat across from me, her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent prayer. Kang sat like a carved stone, his broad shoulders slumped not in defeat, but in a final, weary resignation. I huddled in my corner, the shame of my betrayal, a poison coursing through my veins. I had given them a name, I had broken, and now we were all going to die anyway. I could feel the road incline, the truck straining as it climbed into the familiar hills. I knew these roads. We were going back to the Two-Man River, but to a specific terrible place the locals called the Eagle's Beak, a sharp, jagged cliff that overlooked a particularly deep and violent stretch of the river. It was a known execution site. Bodies were never recovered. The current took them, or the rocks shattered them. It was a clean, final disappearance. The truck stopped, the rear doors flew open, and the cold night air rushed in, a brutal shock. Guards yelled, dragging us out onto the rocky ground. We were there. The wind was stronger up here, whipping across the cliff face, howling like a chorus of lost souls. Below, all I could see was a vast black emptiness, the roar of the river, a constant, hungry growl rising from the abyss. The captain stood before us, a silhouette against the starless sky. Let this be a lesson. He shouted over the wind. There is no God here. There is only the state. Your foreign ideology dies with you tonight. He gestured to the guards. They began untying our hands from behind our backs, only to retie them tightly in front. A small, cruel mercy allowing us a semblance of balance. They lined us up, 21 of us. Along the edge, I was placed near the middle. Micha was to my right, Kang to my left. This was it, the final moments. I looked at Micha. Her face was turned toward the sky, serene, a small, peaceful smile on her lips. She was not here. She was already somewhere else. She was going home. Kang turned his head and looked at me. In the dim light, I saw no accusation in his eyes, only a deep, abiding sorrow. He gave a single, slow nod, a farewell. Then Micha began to sing. It was barely a whisper at first, a fragile thread of sound against the wind's roar. But it grew. It was a hymn I had never heard, a melody of such aching beauty it seemed to silence the very night. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. Her voice gained strength, fueled by a power that was not of this earth. One by one, the other believers joined her, a ragged, defiant choir on the edge of hell. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. The guards were stunned. This was not the script. There were supposed to be screams, begging, terror, not this glorious defiance. The captain's face twisted in fury. "Silence them," he screamed. But they couldn't. The song swelled, 21 voices becoming one. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. The first shove came. A believer at the end of the line, a young woman, was pushed. She did not stop singing as she fell, her voice trailing away into the darkness until it was swallowed by the river's roar. Then another and another. They were being erased, one by one, but their song remained, growing somehow louder, more powerful with each life that was taken. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. They were not victims. They were conquerors. The guards reached Kang. He did not wait for the push. He looked at the captain, looked at the abyss, and with a final thunderous note from the hymn on his lips, he stepped off the edge. A voluntary martyr, a final act of control. Then it was Micha's turn. The guard behind her hesitated. She turned, not to the guard, but to me. Her song had stopped. Her eyes, full of a love so profound, it shattered me, locked with mine. "Tell them, Joon-Ho," she said, her voice clear and calm. "Tell them what you saw here. Do not be afraid." And then she was gone, pushed into the void. Her final command echoing in the space where she had stood. Now it was my turn. I was the last one. The line of believers was gone. Only I remained, trembling on the edge. The captain himself walked over. He grabbed my shoulder, spinning me to face him. His eyes were blazing with hate and something else, confusion. The song had gotten to him. "You see," he spat, "your God did not save them. He does not exist." He shoved me hard. The world dissolved into a nightmare of falling. The wind screamed past my ears. The black rock face rushed up. My life did not flash before my eyes. There was only a single, all-consuming thought. This is it. This is the end. The impact was a universe of pain, a blinding, white-hot explosion that consumed every part of me. I felt bones snap, my body crumpling against something hard and unyielding. Then, nothing. A silent, black void. I fell, believing that was the end of my story. I fell, thinking God had abandoned us. But heaven was just getting started. What happened next in that darkness was not for me, but for the ones who were watching. If you have ever felt that God is silent in your darkest hour, you need to hear what happened next. Subscribe now. Consciousness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as a brutal, throbbing ache. Every breath was a knife in my side. I was cold, so cold, and I was wet. I tried to move, and a white-hot fire erupted in my leg, forcing a choked gasp from my lips. I was alive. I lay on a narrow, jagged ledge, shrouded by a thick, thorny bush that had torn my clothes and skin, but had somehow broken my fall. My body was a road map of broken things. My leg was clearly shattered, my ribs were on fire, and my head pulsed with a dizzying rhythm. But I was alive. Above me, the cliff face stretched into darkness. Below, the river thundered, its spray misting the air. Why? The question was a weak flutter in my mind. Why was I spared? I was a traitor. I was the one who broke. Micha, Kang, the others, They were the faithful. They were the ones who should have witnessed this miracle, not me. This felt less like a rescue and more like a condemnation. I was forced to live with what I had seen, with what I had done. I must have passed out from the pain, because when I opened my eyes again, a faint gray light was seeping into the sky. Dawn. I could see the river now, a churning, angry gray-green. And I could see the rocks below, sharp and unforgiving. The sight made me vomit, the heaving sending fresh waves of agony through my broken ribs. As I lay there, trembling in the cold, my hand brushed against something that was not rock or bush or my own torn clothing. It was soft, supple. I turned my head, my neck screaming in protest. It was a Bible, one of the oilcloth wrapped bundles. It had fallen with us, and by some impossible geometry of the cliff face, it had landed on the same ledge, nestled against the rock, completely untouched. The oilcloth was slick with spray, but when I fumbled with my bound hands to open it, the pages inside were perfectly dry. It was a smaller, more brutal miracle than I could have ever imagined. They had thrown the Word of God off a cliff, and it had survived without a scratch. I heard the voices above, shouts. The guards were still there. They were peering over the edge, but the ledge and the bush hid me from their view. See anything? One yelled. Nothing. The river has them all, another answered. Let's go. This place gives me a bad feeling. But one voice, younger, hesitant, spoke up. Sir, the books, the 21 books, should we not try to retrieve them as evidence? The captain scoffed. For what? They are fish food by now. Let the current take their poison. Our work is done. Move out. Their footsteps receded. I was alone, truly alone, with the Bible and with the weight of 21 lives. Hours passed. The sun rose, doing little to warm my broken body. Thirst became a torment. Despair began to creep back in. What was the point of this? To die slowly of thirst and exposure on this sledge instead of quickly on the rocks below? Then I heard it, not from above, but from the riverbank below, a soft crunch of gravel. I held my breath, listening. Another. Someone was down there. I risked pushing aside a branch of the thorny bush, just enough to see. A single border guard was walking along the narrow strip of shore, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He was young. He was the one who had spoken up, the one who had asked about the Bibles. He was scanning the rocks, not with the dutiful gaze of a soldier looking for contraband, but with the wide, haunted eyes of a man searching for answers. His name was Taeyul. I remembered him from the camp. He was new, barely more than a boy. And then he saw it. Not me, but the Bible. A second oilcloth bundle had been caught in a eddy, washed ashore onto a flat rock, gleaming in the morning. Sunday, he stopped, frozen. He looked around, ensuring he was alone. Then he slowly, cautiously approached it. He knelt down. He didn't pick it up with disgust. He reached out a tentative hand and touched the oilcloth as if it were a live wire. He looked up at the cliff, then back at the book. The confusion on his face was a mirror of my own. He carefully unwrapped it. The black cover, the gold lettering. He flinched, as if expecting it to burn him. He opened it. His eyes scanned the page, his lips moving silently. I saw his shoulders begin to shake. He was crying. He looked up at the cliff again, and this time he wasn't just looking, he was seeing. He was remembering the song, the defiance, the peace. He was connecting the dots between the 21 who sang as they died and this book that the river could not swallow. In that moment, on my ledge of agony, I understood. The miracle was not my survival. My survival was merely a vehicle. The miracle was what was happening on that riverbank below me. The spark had not been extinguished. It had been planted. It had been planted in the most unlikely of soils, the heart of our enemy. Taeyul quickly rewrapped the Bible. He didn't throw it back into the river. He didn't report it. He tucked it inside his uniform jacket against his chest. He stood up, wiped his eyes, and walked away, a changed man. He was the first fruit of the revival, the first echo of their return. I watched him go, a profound, weary understanding settling over me. My purpose was now clear. I had to get off this ledge. I had to live, not for myself, but for them, to find a way to tell this story, to tell of the 21 who sang in the face of death, and the spark that fell from a cliff and refused to die. The journey of the ledge is a story of its own, a story of pain and crawling and a desperation fueled by a divine command. But I made it. I do not know how. I was found by a farmer who, seeing my condition, did not turn me in, but hid me. The network, though wounded, was not dead. The story of the execution and the missing Bibles had already begun to spread, a ghost story with the power of truth. And I, the witness, was carried along its secret currents, out of the darkness, and eventually to you. The farmer's name was Park, and he risked everything. He found me half dead in his field, a broken animal dragged there by instinct alone. He did not ask questions. His eyes, old and weary, saw my bound hands, my shattered leg, the look of a man hunted. He simply nodded, and with a strength that belied his age, he carried me into a hidden root cellar beneath his barn. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and potatoes. It became my world. For weeks, I drifted in and out of a feverish haze. Mr. Park set my leg as best he could with splints made from firewood. His wife, a silent woman with hands worn rough from work, brought me bitter herbal teas and thin rice gruel. They were poor. The food they gave me was food they did not have. I was a burden they accepted without complaint. I learned later that their son had been taken by the Bowibu years ago for an unknown crime. In me, perhaps, they were saving the son they could not save then. The physical pain was a constant fire, but the pain in my soul was worse. In the darkness of that cellar, I saw their faces. Micha's final loving command, "Tell them," Kang's stoic nod. The 21 voices rising in a hymn that was swallowed by the abyss, and my own voice giving the baker's name to the captain. The shame was a physical weight, crushing me deeper into the dirt floor. I was a coward, a traitor. I did not deserve this second chance. I prayed for death to take me and finish the job the cliff had bungled. But death did not come. Instead, memories of the Bible on the ledge, dry and perfect, came to me. The image of a young Taeyul weeping as he held a forbidden book to his chest. A spark, he had called it. In the overwhelming darkness of my guilt, that single word was a pinprick of light. One night, as I lay sweating and shivering, Mr. Park came down and sat beside my pallet. He did not speak for a long time. Then, he said, "The guards, they still patrol the villages, but they are not looking for you. I turned my head, wincing at the pain. What do you mean? They think you are dead, he said, his voice low. But they are quieter now. They do not shout as much. The young one, Taeyu, he tells the others a story. My breath caught. A story? He tells of a ghost song on the cliff. He tells of 21 souls who were not afraid. Mr. Park looked at me, his eyes gleaming in the faint candlelight. He does not say he believes, but he asks questions. He wonders what kind of truth makes a man sing as he falls. I close my eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on my cheek. The spark. It was alive. It was spreading. Not in a roaring flame, but in a whisper. A question in the mind of a soldier. A story passed in the dark. The regime could kill the people, but it could not kill the story. The story was a ghost they could not catch. This changed everything. My survival was not about my worthiness. It was about the story. I was the only one left who could connect the song on the cliff to the spark in the guardhouse. I was a keeper of the testimony. My own guilt, my own shame was irrelevant. The story was bigger than I was. A fierce, desperate determination began to burn in me, cutting through the fever and the despair. I had to heal. I had to get stronger. I had to find a way out, not for myself, but for Micha, for Kang, for the 20. I would carry their story. I would become the echo they demanded. Weeks turned into a month. I could finally sit up. Then I could stand, leaning heavily on a crutch Mr. Park carved for me. The pain was excruciating, but I welcomed it. It was a reminder of the cost. I practiced walking in the small, confined space. My teeth greeted the image of their faces, my only fuel. Mr. Park brought me news from the outside, gathered in whispers at the market. The story of the ghost cliff was spreading. Some said angels had caught the believers. Others said their spirits now haunted the river, singing hymns to lure wicked guards to their doom. But among a few, a different story was told. A story of a book that survived the fall, a book that now moved through the hands of the faithful, more powerful and holy than ever because of the blood shed for it. The revival had begun, not with a preacher on a platform, but with a whisper in a field, a question in a barracks, a ghost story that carried the scent of truth. And I, the witness, was still trapped in a hole in the ground. I had to get out. I had to find the network. The message came through the wife. She returned from the market one afternoon, her face pale but determined. She knelt beside me and spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. A man, he was selling needles and thread. He said to me, "The winter is long, but the rock remains." My heart stopped. It was the code, a phrase from the Psalms that Mr. Kim had taught me, used only in the most extreme emergencies. The network was reaching out. They were alive. The response, I whispered, my throat tight. The response is, the shepherd finds his sheep in the storm. She nodded, memorizing the words. The next day she returned with a bundle of cloth. Hidden within it was a note. The instructions were terrifyingly simple. I was to be moved. The risk of staying was too great. In 3 nights, a guide would come. I had to be ready to travel. The wait was agony. Every sound outside was the Bowibu. Every footstep was the end. But on the 3rd night, a soft, rhythmic scratching came at the cellar door, the signal. Mr. Park opened it. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the night. It was not someone I recognized. He was young, with a sharp, anxious face. "My name is Min," he said, his voice barely audible. "We have a long way to go. Can you walk?" "I can try." I said, leaning on my crutch. He shook his head. No, you must do more than try. If you cannot keep up, I will have to leave you for the safety of the chain. His words were not cruel, merely factual. The reality of the network was a mercy without sentiment. The journey that followed was a blur of pain and terror. We moved only at night through frozen fields and dense silent forests. Min was a ghost, his movements fluid and silent. I was a clumsy, broken shadow, my crutch slipping on the icy ground, every step sending jolts of fire through my body. I bit down on a piece of leather to keep from crying out. I thought of Micha's smile. I thought of the song. And I pushed forward. We reached a safe house, a shack clinging to the side of a remote mountain. There, I met others. A woman named Hana, whose husband had been taken in the same purge that caught Mr. Kim. An old man, teacher Kwon, who taught children to read using smuggled Bible pages. They were the remnants, the spark that the regime had failed to extinguish. They told me stories that made my survival feel less like a miracle and more like a part of a larger divine pattern. They told me of a guard at a labor camp who had begun secretly leaving extra food for the prisoners, whispering, "The shepherd provides." They told me of a party official in a small town who had suddenly resigned, citing a crisis of conscience. And they told me of Taeyul, the young guard. He had not just kept one Bible, he had become a distributor. Using his position, he would leave wrapped bundles in predetermined places, a silent, dangerous ministry to the underground church. The cliff had not been an ending, it had been a sowing. The 21 lips were seeds thrown into the hard soil of that nation. And now, against all odds, green shoots were breaking through the frozen ground. Weeks turned into months within the mountain network. My body slowly healed, though the limp and the ache would remain, a permanent memorial. I learned that a path was being prepared for me, a dangerous, nearly impossible route out through China and into Mongolia. My testimony, they believed, was not just for the inside, it was for the outside world. It was for the global church asleep in its comfort. It was a fire that needed to be carried beyond the border. The night before I was to begin the final leg of my escape, Teacher Kwon gathered everyone. We had no Bible. It was too dangerous to keep one in a permanent location. But we had our memories. "Brother Joon-Ho," Teacher Kwon said, his voice old but steady, "you will be our voice. Tell them the cost. Tell them the price of the book they leave on their shelves. Tell them of the song on the cliff." He then began to recite, and we all joined him, our voices a low, unified whisper in the dark mountain shack. It was the same hymn, the hymn from the cliff. "On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand." I wept. I wept for the ones who were not singing with us. I wept for my own failure, and I wept for the breathtaking, terrible beauty of a faith that could not be killed. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a messenger, a living relic of a resurrection that had happened not to a man but to a truth. The spark in the abyss was no longer just a glimmer. It was a fire in my bones, and I was taking it with me. The journey out was a story of its own, a story of shadows and fake documents and the kindness of strangers who asked no questions. It involved weeks of hiding in the false bottom of a fishing boat, the stench of diesel and rot my constant companion. It involved the treacherous desert crossing under a brutal sun, guided by a man who never told me his name. With every mile, the air felt lighter. The fear, a constant companion for so long, began to recede, replaced by a strange, hollow feeling. It was the silence of safety, a sound I had forgotten. I finally arrived in a country where Bibles were not just allowed, they were sold in stores, stacked on shelves like common goods. I saw them and I wept in the middle of the shop. People stared. They did not understand. How could they? To them, it was a book. To me, it was Micha's smile. It was Kang's nod. It was the weight of 21 souls. I was given a small, clean room, a bed, food that was plentiful. But in the silence, the memories were louder than ever. The luxury of safety felt like a betrayal. How could I sleep on a soft bed when my brothers and sisters slept in the cold ground of a prison camp? How could I eat this full meal when Hana and teacher Kwon were still there, starving in spirit and body? I was free, but I was in a new kind of prison. The prison of memory, the prison of a story that was too heavy to carry and too sacred to forget. I was introduced to a pastor here, a kind man. He offered to help me. He found me this place, this studio, with this microphone. He said, "Tell your story, Joon-Ho. The world needs to hear it." And I tried, but the words would not come. They were stuck behind a wall of grief and guilt. I would sit here in the silence, and I would see their faces. I would feel the rough rope on my wrist. I would hear the wind on the cliff, and I would break again and again. I asked God, why? Why did you spare me? The coward? The traitor? Why not Micha? Why not Kang? They were the faithful ones. They were the strong ones. They deserved to be here to tell this story with the power it deserved. Not me. I am just a broken vessel, cracked and flawed. And then, in the deepest of my despair, a truth settled upon my heart. It did not come as a voice, but as a quiet knowing. I was not chosen despite my flaws. I was chosen because of them. The world does not need to hear from a perfect, unblemished saint. The world is full of cowards. It is full of people who have compromised, people who have failed, people who are broken. They need to hear from someone like me, someone who broke under pressure, who betrayed his friends, who was saved by a grace he did not deserve. My testimony is not that I was strong. My testimony is that God is strong even when we are at our weakest. The story is not about my survival, it is about His glory. The echo is not about my voice, it is about the song of the 21 that my voice gets to carry. So I sit here today, my hands are no longer bound, but I can still feel the ghost of the rope. I am free to speak, but I speak with the weight of the silence upon me. I am not telling you a story from a book. I am giving you a piece of my soul, a piece of their souls. This is my echo. This is my return. And it leads me to only one place. To you, I have crossed the rivers and deserts to bring this echo to you. I speak into this microphone, but I am speaking for the ones who have no voice. The least you can do, the very least, is listen and ensure their song does not end here. Subscribe to Echoes of a Return. Become part of this story. Do not let their sacrifice be in vain. I have shown you the darkness so you can appreciate the light. I have told you of the cost so you can understand the value. The 21, they are not just a number. They are a living echo in the heart of God. And their story is now your story. What will you do with it? Will you let it be a moment of sadness, a tragic tale you hear and then forget? Or will you let it change you? Will you let their sacrifice rewrite the priorities of your own life? In your world, you have the freedom they died for. You have the book they smuggled. You can read it anytime you want. You can gather and worship without fear. Do not, I beg you, do not treat these things as ordinary. They are written in blood. They are paid for with lives. This is the holy call of their echo. Return. Return to the Gospels. Return to the truth. Return to Christ. Not as a tradition, not as a habit, but as the ultimate reality. The same reality that gave Micha her smile on the cliff. The same reality that gave Kang the courage to step forward. The same reality that turned a coward like me into a witness. Their faith was not a comfort blanket. It was a backbone. It was a rock. And on that rock, they stood unshaken as the world itself fell away from them. This is the faith that is offered to you. Not a faith of rules and rituals, but a faith that conquers death. I am the echo, but you are the sound. Where will this story go from here? Will it die in your ears, or will it live in your actions? Will you be the next link in the chain? The revival did not end on that cliff. It began there, and it continues here with you right now. Every time you choose faith over fear, every time you cherish the word they died for, every time you share this testimony, you become part of it. You water the seeds they planted in their blood. I have done my part. I have brought you the echo. Now the rest is up to you. Do not let their song end with me. I am the last voice of the 21. When I am gone, their story is in your hands. By subscribing to this channel, you are not just clicking a button, you are raising a monument. You are vowing to remember. You are ensuring that an echo becomes a roar that shakes the foundations of hell itself. Subscribe to Echoes of Return for Micha, for Kang, for the 20, for the spark that must never die.